Our next item. Are we good? Are we okay? Okay. I did not have anybody sign up for public comments, so the next item on the agenda, educational presentations and committee discussion. Item A is what informational updates should be provided by the task force to the City of Wausau Council, City Council, and Marathon County Board of Supervisors, subordinate bodies relative to task force efforts to this point and the next steps. If I could, if Administrator Leonard is ready for an update.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. So I think just to frame this up, Co-Chair Cavelli asked me to kind of give my thoughts relative to, again, going back to your task force charter and an update. This really relates to, in large part, your discussion and possible action item because, as you know, task forces are generally time limited, and your time limit is coming up. So it dovetails nicely with what I think is going to be a request to extend the term of the task force to allow you to complete your work. But really, to do that, you'll need to give an educational presentation to the Health and Human Services Committee on the Marathon County side. I think makes the most sense from my perspective, and having talked with Chair Gibbs about his thoughts as to where that would go as a process that would then go to the Marathon County Board. I can't speak for the City Council side on how that would go, but my sense is very similarly that it would go to the City Council for ultimate adoption relative to an extension through, in speaking with Co-Chair Cavelli, he thought April 1st would allow enough time to get that done. So in terms of an educational presentation, my suggestion as staff would be to work and really go through what were the original goals and outcome recommendations under the charter. Again, the short-term goal, I think that's a very, that will be a short presentation because, again, it really kind of became a moot point with respect to the acquisition of the Annabelle Apartments based on Bridge Street finding another purchaser for those. But with respect to the intermediate term goal, I think you did receive a lot of information relative to the demographic data surrounding our current unhoused population. And it dovetails nicely, again, with the action that you took at one of your recent meetings, essentially answering that question in the affirmative as to whether or not the demographic data really necessitated the need for some sort of formal mechanism to engage surrounding municipalities relative to resource sharing agreements. It dovetails, again, nicely with the discussion you've had here. Similar to some of the challenges that have existed or continue to exist in other municipalities, other areas around the state, most notably recently the Eau Claire region that I know Chief Barnes has talked about, where they're having a similar challenge with respect to individuals being transported to that municipality and some of the resource scarcity concerns they have. So I think that makes sense also to provide that update. And then probably most notably, I missed your last meeting, of course, but the meeting where you received information from the city and county of La Crosse, I think it provides a very good framework for what that direction is for the city and county to try to partner in addressing this challenge, which again is consistent with the action that you gave myself and city staff to work together not only on the short-term challenge, which I think we'll get to in your second discussion item, the short-term challenge with respect to shelter, to provide an opportunity for or a course of action relative to addressing the challenge in that short-term respect, but also that longer-term vision of the city and county working together. My sense is that La Crosse presentation, at least from my perspective, is very illuminating. There's a lot of similarities. I think there are some things in some respects where we're certainly even better positioned than they were when they started, or even in some respects where they are now. But that, from my perspective, Mr. Co-Chair, would be a good way to frame that presentation to both the whatever city council body, subordinate body that the mayor and council president think are appropriate to present to, But then on the county side, that would be to the Health and Human Services Committee based on my conversation with Chair Gibbs.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. Any discussion? So the one thing that I'm going to work with Administrator Leonard on is that presentation, what that's going to look like, so we can have a city and a county presentation.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And I guess, is there anything from what I laid out, and again, I missed your last meeting, but anything missing or, hey, make sure we highlight this, or perhaps you would characterize it differently? Again, my role as staff is to support you in information gathering, and I think ultimately I have no issue making a presentation with either the co-chairs or both. But the policy decisions aren't mine to make, and ultimately the board's to make. So I want to make sure I'm capturing kind of what I see accurately in terms of, or what you have seen and how you characterize the recent meetings and the information you received.
Yeah, thank you. And I think you're on the right track from what we discussed on short-term goals and our long-term goals. And then the presentation that the County of La Crosse had presented to us, and trying to use some of that baseline to generate that information for the respective boards and council, if that makes sense. Go ahead, Greg.
So I'm just trying to clarify. So when is our 100 days up, number one? And then number two, this request at this point, because we're getting close to that ending, are we saying that we then need to be going to the city and the county to give an update on what we've accomplished so far? Is that what we're, or accomplished, or just learned to this point?
Yeah, so today would be our, if we base it off of our first meeting, would be 78 days. So we have a 100-day charter, so we're getting close. So we need to extend or, come up with some type of recommendation, at least on the county side. We'll do it through the Health and Human Resources Committee. In the city, however, they determine that they need to bring it to the city. So the other thing on our agenda, and we'll talk about in a minute, is extending that 100 days. So, Bill?
So is it only, like you said, is it only informational, this is what we've learned, or is it this is what this body is recommending? Are we recommending more case management, more data collection, that kind of thing? Or is it, we've discovered this population, these are the gaps, that kind of thing?
Right, and it's my understanding that we could bring those recommendations to the respective committees on what we feel that the direction the county should take or the city should take in that partnership. So I think we can help determine that recommendation, whatever that looks like.
If I can add, Mr. Chair. And again, this is just the staff perspective and my characterization of your previous meeting. So if I'm off base, let me know. My interpretation of your last direction relative to, at least on the short-term side, was for myself, the administrator, to work with city staff to develop a short-term response to the kind of immediate need we have relative to the upcoming termination of the overnight emergency shelter situation in May. My sense to what I understand your specific question is your recommendation to Health and Human Services. It's not only to extend your charter, because I still think you do have work to do when you look at your long-term goals. In my mind, those things are best delivered by a report, task force generating a report. But your short-term action that you gave, jumping ahead to item 4A, my sense is your recommendation is going to be, I assume it's going to be that the county needs to allocate some fiscal resources to partner with the city in filling that upcoming gap relative to shelter services, and then also plan for the 2026 budget to adopt something similar to our own version of a lacrosse, the city and county of lacrosse model. To do that effectively, to make an ask not only to extend your term of your charter to, in speaking with Co-Chair Cavelli, and he thought April 1st would allow you to kind of get that report in order. But if you're going to make a request for some sort of fiscal commitment yet this year, you need to do that relatively promptly. And my thought is you do that most effectively when you give some sort of informational update as to, hey, this is what we've done thus far. This is what we've learned. This is the action we've taken. And you did take formal action relative to a short-term direction to myself and city staff, as well as a long-term direction to city staff and myself. So I think I'd cover all those things. And I try to do it. And I always say, what's the best amount of time to spend on a presentation? 20 minutes. I always aim for 15 to 20 minutes with a committee. I don't want to do more because you'll have questions. But that, at least from the staff perspective, is my interpretation of what you've done to this point. Again, if I'm off base, let me know. And of course, you will discuss what your short-term recommendation is relative to both those items. Do you think April 1st is enough time to extend your charter? And then also, if there's a recommendation relative to the county to partner with the city in the way that the city's, at least recently and for the 2025 calendar year, working to address that challenge on the shelter side, my sense is you want to do that relatively promptly, like this month at your meeting today.
Craig, are you going to say something?
So I'm not sure if we're ready to make recommendations, because unless there were conversations outside of the room, I don't know that we agreed on recommendations in this group.
Right. That's what today is for, that discussion.
Okay.
And the direction that we would like Administrator Leonard and the city to take on moving forward.
Okay. So that will happen today.
Right.
Okay.
So I'll open up the floor.
So then what would we need more time for?
So to be able to, because we're coming up on 100 days, which that's our
But if we're going
end
to
of our
make our
charter.
recommendations out of committee today, would the further actions of this task force be after those recommendations were passed on?
I think because it has to go through committee for approvals, and if they have questions, they can come back to the committee with those questions.
Is it?
Can I, if you can answer all of the questions that you were tasked with today, and I will take notes, and I know we're recording the meeting. Do you have recommendations relative to the specific roles of other local municipalities, the surrounding municipalities? If you have that, if you have identified gaps in mental health and substance abuse treatment resources and make recommendations as appropriate relative to the needs of the homeless population in light of services available via non-government providers and the mandates and fiscal limitations of local governments. If you can do all that today and reduce it to writing, and then also come up with opportunities, you've explored opportunities for businesses to contribute resources, expertise, and support to homeless initiatives and report on the findings. And then finally, report on the services provided by local nonprofits and faith-based organizations relative to transitional housing, transportation, and other support services for homeless individuals, identifying opportunities to maximize the effectiveness of these initiatives and enhance comprehensive support. If you can reduce all that to writing and approve it today, yeah, there's no need for you to continue. My sense, again, is that those things are best delivered in the form of a report. And I'm not aware of you as a body generating that report, reviewing the report, and offering it. So I assumed there was going to be a recommendation based on my conversation with Chair Cavelli that you'd extend until April. To extend until April 1st would allow you to make a presentation, I would assume, in April then to the various committees at the city and at the county that would be interested in hearing your information. It just strikes me there's a lot of those things to do. And it's certainly, you can have the discussion on those things. When I read them, if I were tasked with doing this work, and the word is to report on various pieces, I would generate a report and deliver it, have your debate about, I mean, my sense is someone's got to write it, then you're going to review it, talk about it, and make modifications to it. If you can do all those things today,
Yeah, my understanding or my memory, unless I'm wrong, is that we've discussed the first two / bullet points under the long term, but we haven't discussed the next 2 bullet points. So I would say we're certainly not even ready to make a recommendation until we've finished that. So what you're saying then is that because of the time frame, we probably need to ask to extend another 30 days beyond our 100 days. Is that correct?
yeah, my recommendation, I mean, is always, I put my old lawyer hat on just for a minute. If your charter was to expire after 100 days, and I can't recall off the top of my head when both city and county actually took formal action to create you, it's always good to go back. We did this with previous task forces to say, hey, we need to be reconstituted or extend our charter, and then give them an update on the remaining work, like you just laid out, Mr. Vincent, and the remaining work you have and the work that you've done. Logically, that makes sense to me. And to the extent I can assist, happy to do that. But that's kind of where you are with respect to your charter and your long-term goals. You did make, I think, and I can read back your action from your motion at the last meeting that I was able to attend. You did give very specific direction relative to short-term interaction with myself and city staff on the kind of impending end of shelter resources. And also that city staff and county staff work together to develop a long-range plan. But those other items, to your point, Mr. Vincent, are kind of still outstanding, which would certainly inform county staff and city staff on what that long-term plan and long-term vision would look like.
Mr. Chair, Terry has her hand raised as well.
Go ahead, Terry.
She's muted.
Terry, I think you're on mute.
Am I muted?
Not anymore. Nope. Go ahead.
Oh, now she is again.
Am I good?
Yeah, we can hear you.
She keeps muting herself. Does she hit her? Terry, you must be muting yourself because
All right,
every
I'll
time
do
you
it
start to
again.
talk, it goes down again.
No, just stop. Just talk.
Nope, she's muted again. Okay, now you're unmuted. Don't touch anything.
I won't touch anything.
Okay.
We have
Okay.
had many gaps identified and a lot of statistics given to us, but it feels like the task force hasn't had an opportunity to talk about any specific recommendations. We know that housing is an issue. We know that we're short of AODA and alcohol services. There are many issues, but it doesn't feel like the task force has had the opportunity to talk about any specific kinds of ideas or recommendations. I know at one of the meetings, Supervisor Conway brought up an idea about housing and using some of the housing owned by Marathon County, and that went no further. When are we going to have the opportunity to talk about specific recommendations?
Yeah, go ahead, Vicki.
Well, I certainly don't have an answer to that, but I wanted to kind of add on to this, is that we've had discussion about gaps, so I would absolutely agree with that. And when we talked about this last time, in particular, the gaps with mental health and substance use disorder treatment, we talked about that at a very high level, given some of the reports that we had and some of the information that I would have available through North Central Healthcare. That really is not a deep dive into other private agencies and what they provide and that type of thing. The other piece that we really laid on top of that was that That's a general brush of our gap in resources. And then specifically, I feel like it's what comes first, the chicken or the egg, maybe here, because depending on what recommendation we put forward and the city and the county agree to in terms of what is the result of this work. So what is the scope of what the city and the county will move forward and what we would be recommending? That piece then ties to specifically what the gaps are with mental health and substance use, because it depends on how many people are we talking about, at what levels. Are we talking about a triage system like La Crosse did in 5 years? So you can't really finalize a gap analysis until you have your scope of what it is you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, at what point in time do we discuss specifics?
Well, I think we had discussed a lot of specifics early on in the first few meetings, and we got a lot of data, especially when Tracy was presenting some things, and then Vicki with her services that she deals with. I think we have a lot of data. I think the next step is to be able to put all of that into a report like Administrator Leonard was talking about, so we can see and give an update to our respective committees and the county and city staff that, this is where we are, right? And come up with the recommendations for short-term and the long-term goals, right? And I don't know, Administrator Leonard, if you, at this level for the task force, are we able to rely on your resources to identify some of those gaps?
Of course. Staff, our job is to assist, and I'm happy to work to put together, based on the conversations, to your point, Ms. Killian, about, the conversations you've had, reduce those to writing so you actually have something in front of you to kind of frame what your ultimate recommendations are going to be. I think to Mr. Vincent's point, you've had a lot of conversations about a number of items, but let's put those, in my sense would be, put them in writing, allow for, there are probably certain areas where perhaps some of you are well suited to take the lead on drafting various parts. I think back to other task forces where I've participated as a staff person or a member, and you can delegate those pieces out. So with respect to the gaps in mental health and substance abuse treatment, as Vicki just referenced, probably a good area for Vicki to frame up kind of what are those existing areas that exist, because I think as the conversation was had at this committee, there's a lot of resources we have in this community that if you talk to other counties and other municipalities, we have far more than other places do. Do we have mechanisms in place that work well to link the individuals you're all talking about with those services? I think there's my assessment of your conversation would you probably all answer, no, there's ways we can improve. But getting that down in writing, I think makes good sense, and to say, hey, I can take this part. If there are members that would like to work on that, I think that makes good sense. I, as staff, certainly can work to take the data you've received with respect to the demographic data and start to put that together into a report, given the act that you've taken. Again, you've already given direction that, yes, the demographic data you received was sufficient to warrant the creation of some formal mechanism to work with surrounding municipalities. I can work on framing that up in light of the action you've already taken, as well as a section that talks about the work that La Crosse has done and that they provided you based on the action you've already taken. The other areas, the business community, what are the opportunities to engage businesses? I think that's conversation you need to have, and what that might look like, and reduce that to writing. Your support from nonprofit and faith-based organizations. Again, I think you've had some conversations. Perhaps certain members of your task force are well suited to take the lead on framing that up. But staff, if you ask me to try to free up some resources, I will do my best to assist you. But I am not in the position, and I won't make policy recommendations for this body. My job is to help you make policy recommendations to the, particularly for me, it's the county, and then whatever policy action the county takes, it's to carry it out.
Could you just give me an example of, for example, housing was identified as one of the primary issues for the homeless. If you draft your reports, how will that housing issue move forward? I mean, will different committees say, okay, we're going to work on housing? What exactly will happen?
I'll give you my lawyer response first. It depends. It depends on what your recommendation is, but I can tell you that the county is talking about housing and what its role is. In fact, there's an Education Extension Economic Development Committee meeting tomorrow where the county, as you kind of alluded to, there are parcels that the county takes ownership of, most notably through tax foreclosure. And the county has been evaluating some models whereby it can work to expand access for what I'll call owner-occupied or workforce housing. So, for example, they have received a couple of presentations, I should say, from Bayfield County on some of the things they're doing. So if a parcel is taken through tax foreclosure, the county will be evaluating, that committee will be evaluating tomorrow whether or not to put a covenant or a deed restriction on that property through that, following that foreclosure process that requires, if the parcel is non-improved, that is, there's not housing on it, and it is developable, should they put a deed restriction on that requires housing be constructed within 2 years. Furthermore, they're evaluating whether or not to put a deed restriction on those parcels that have housing on them, that the parcel not be utilized for a short-term rental parcel. The idea being long-term rentals are utilized very often. They're an important part of the housing market, but and also owner-occupied is important. But that perhaps the short-term rental market is removing parcels and housing that might otherwise be available for workforce housing from the market. So the county is looking into that. It's done that similarly already with some parcels that were no longer needed for county operations. We sold just recently a parcel to the city across from the University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point Wausau campus, with the express understanding that the city was going to develop that into housing. And in fact, there was a condition put on the sale that it must be redeveloped into housing within 2 years, or the county retains the right to purchase it back. And in fact, we just also closed on a parcel, I believe last week, that with Habitat for Humanity, that they redevelop a parcel that the county had owned and put housing on that parcel. So the county is looking into what it can do. I've received direction from leadership, various committees, when we ultimately finish our consolidation work, where we have county facilities that are no longer needed for government operations, putting together requests for proposals for redevelopment. So it's different than, of course, what the city has the opportunity to do with its economic development department and the CDA, but there are things that are within the county's scope of control. Certainly, this committee could give direction to say, continue those efforts to address the lack of housing that you all read about in the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Study. And we can reduce some of those things to bullet points that I just referenced. But those are the things that, if you ask what would the county do, those are going to continue, quite honestly, I would imagine, regardless of whether you recommend that the county continue them, because those conversations have continued. There are a lot of things within the county's control. I would probably say perhaps less so than that are directly within the city's control with its CDA, but they're different. They're different in some respects. Zoning is another one that, again, the county Education Extension Economic Development Committee may ask another committee to look at as they're receiving a presentation, an informational presentation from the Builders Association on the impact of some of the zoning requirements that currently exist on housing costs. I hope that answers your question. It was certainly a bit long of a response.
Thank you.
So if I can go back just to clarify, our intermediate 45-day, we made the recommendation that there's a formal mechanism of some kind, and La Crosse is serving as a good model of what others have done. So that has been accomplished. And so at this meeting, we need to share that we've made that recommendation and give them an idea of what the La Crosse model looks like. Is that accurate?
People are looking to me, so I can't.
Oh,
help
I'm
but
sorry.
answer. But I think that makes sense. I mean, you know, the way that government works, right, is we have subordinate bodies and you report up. It's been my experience. It's always good to give a bit of background information on, okay, why are we here? We're presenting to you because if I were in your shoes, I'd say we're presenting to you because we've done a lot of work to this point, and we've been tasked with a number of things. We've accomplished a number of those. Let us tell you about the information we received and the action we've taken. And then you also have an ask of that committee, which is to recommend on the county side, the committee to recommend to the county board to extend your charter. You have a similar request on the city side.
Excellent. Got it.
Assuming, again, that you're not going to be able to reduce all those things to writing that I said yet today.
And then one other thing, and I'll give it to you, Vicki, next. So as we started working on gaps, the initial question was mental health and substance abuse treatment gaps. But our whole list of gaps was much broader than that. We got into sheltering gaps and things like that. Is that a problem? Or are we okay presenting that as an answer when we start our gaps? And I wrote down 6 gaps. And not all of them have to do with mental health and treatment. Is that a problem?
No,
necessarily?
absolutely not.
Okay.
I think you're on the right track, Greg.
Okay.
And I think that, you know, the more accurate information that we can bring to the committee level,
Yep.
I think the better informed that everyone will be.
Right. So
Yep.
what we're reporting, while we ask for an extension, what we're reporting is that formal mechanism recommendation, the model of La Crosse, and this is what we've identified as gaps.
Right.
And that's basically all we have right now.
Right now.
And so do we need to make this report prior to our next meeting?
Yeah, so actually, I don't know, Administrator Leonard, I know we have a Health and Human Services meeting next week. I don't know if we'll be ready by then.
My answer on the report, I doubt you'll have the report done by next week. But I do think, you know, to Mr. Vincent's question about what would be in your oral report to the committee, you've done a nice job, Craig, to kind of provide that overview. I also think that's where you'd make that ask about extending your charter. And if there is a direction to the county in the short term, consistent with your recommendation a couple of weeks ago to me, to work with city staff, if your direction to the county as a policy recommendation and really a financial ask is in 2025 to allocate funding to address that short-term shelter challenge you discussed, that would be the time to make that. Because I would need to, if the county board directs me, then I would come up with a formal mechanism and a source of funding to be that partner while that longer discussion about the long-term strategy to address homelessness while that takes place.
So we would want to make that action today.
Mm-hmm.
And then final question is, when is this report being made? When,
Yeah, so
when are the meetings of the council?
I think
and-
like Administrator Leonard said that, you know, we can do an oral report to our committee next week. I can. And, you know, maybe Supervisor Conway can help with that too. And then, you know, if we pass our recommendation today, item number 4, we can bring that to the committee as well for that recommendation.
So I think what what's going around in my head, and I mean, for me, words matter. And so when I look at the mission and look at our task is really to develop a shared strategy relative to the roles of the city and county. And so that's where I'm going. We are looking at gaps, but the example, and it's on the agenda in the proper way, but I'm just pulling this together in my head, is that if we are saying that we do think it is the role of the city and the county to provide resources for a shelter, which is on the agenda later, that is an example of what we're recommending is the role of the city and the county, and then to make that request, and that would be, again, a shorter term goal versus all the other things that we talked about are, our more in-depth gap analysis about a longer-term plan. And so to me, then there would be an additional clarification request or ask of the role of the city of the county in relation to those pieces. And that's kind of more like on a final report. I guess that's how does that make sense to people?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So any other discussion? So we'll move on to item number 4, discussion possible action recommendation from City of Wausau Marathon County Joint Task Force on Homelessness to extend the task force charter term until April 1st, 2025 to the City of Wausau and Marathon County. And we would need a motion for that. Have a
I'll make a motion. This is Vicki.
motion by Vicki. Do we have a second?
I would second that.
And second by Bill. Do we have any,
I would make an amendment to the motion, if I could.
sure.
I think we need to have a different member of the business community appointed. Mr. Olson hasn't been here. So, and also, we don't have anyone who is unhoused or recently unhoused on the committee. We have, Beth Ann, but I think that would be an important element to add as well.
So I didn't hear the second part, the business community.
Different business community leader
representation?
and someone who is either currently unhoused or unhoused within the last 90 days as a member of the task force. Additional.
And I really think that the business community member would be just a backfill of the business community member that was on the task force to begin with, right? So we have an amendment to the motion on the table. Vote on the amendment first, is that correct?
Second
Is there a second? Need a second?
amendment.
Amendment, correct. And Becky, you got a second?
Yeah, I'll second that. I guess I want to make sure that that finding the unhoused individual, I just don't know how easy that's going to be. And that's fine, we can look and we can talk to Tracy or whatever, but I don't want to stop our work. That's my only concern.
Yeah, I get that. But I think everyone in this room knows at least a few that would be good candidates.
My recommendation, are we in discussion point?
Discussion, yep.
So it's been seconded? All right. So I guess my recommendation would be to look a little farther into recovery with that person, but maybe someone who's experienced homelessness but is now in a healthy lifestyle and is succeeding. I think that would be a stronger committee member for helping us accomplish our purposes. Yeah, and I would not vote for the amendment if it has to be less than 90 days out of the, yeah, I just want someone who's. Like to amend the amendment? If you could amend it to someone who's experienced homelessness, and but not put a time frame on it.
I would second that amendment to the amendment.
Can I make a suggestion?
Go ahead.
I'm not going to be playing Robert's rules, but generally speaking with the committees, we're a bit less formal than perhaps you've seen at the county board or city council. So if you made the second to allow for those, essentially, as I would term it, a recommendation to both the city and county to also fill the currently vacant business community representative, but also have a representative of the unhoused population, and your original term was someone who's currently unhoused or had been within 90 days. If it's just a representative of someone who had previously experienced homelessness, if that would be your amendment to the original motion, and the second is amenable to your language clarification, I think we can proceed with a vote on that amendment.
Yeah, as long as it fulfills the nothing about us without us.
Okay. Do we need any other,
Just so I'm clear, the second is amenable to that language clarification?
okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Amendment passes. So now back to the original recommendation from the city of Wausau with the amendment added to add the business committee member and member of the, what do we?
A representative who's previously experienced homelessness.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor, signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? The motion passes. Item B, recommendation from the task force relative to local government supportive shelter services. And I think this is where we come in with, the recommendations for the allocating funding for short-term housing, and then the opportunities for the gaps in the housing. Go ahead, Bill.
One other thing that I always wondered about, for the community on call that we have, that works quite well, what is the barrier to having that operate whenever, like, the shelter space is over capacity, as opposed to just over capacity and cold, super cold?
It takes advance notice and preparation to mobilize. So unless you did it every day, you couldn't wait till that evening and find out you didn't have enough space.
Zoning. Wouldn't it also be zoning? Because they're not zoned at the overnight shelter right now for only a certain amount of people, and there's that limit is only raised during that period of time. My understanding is that was related to the zoning, as well as the overnight shelter at Bridge.
But it's not always at Bridge, though, right? Or is
Well, I attended quite the NIMBY presentation at the city council about this, so I'm fairly positive. But the issue, I think, still would be, we are recommending that there be more shelter, right?
Yeah.
And this is not necessarily in response to whatever is going on at Catholic Charities, which is completely kind of nobody quite understands right now. I heard at the Balance of State just last month that they said that they will have, or last week, they will be providing overnight shelter in the future, which is the opposite of what we heard earlier, right? So then it would be, are talking about day shelter, but we're not talking about day shelter. We're talking about overnight shelter.
What the chief of police is looking for an RFP is to find a shelter. I think that Catholic Charities is going to a model of April to November and not during the summer months that we had previously, or from April 30th through October. That was what I understood was the chief was going to put on an RFP for a night shelter for that period, and also looking forward to having day services at the same time. So I heard Catholic Charities would continue, but not during, because the city was paying for sheltering off that April through November.
I think you have to be careful with what's heard necessarily, because there's different conversations that Catholic Charities is committed to 365 shelter, but it may not necessarily be funded by the city, because there's going to be an RFP that other people could bid on, not just Catholic Charities. So it may not be the city-funded shelter, but they may still be committed to, I can't speak for them, but just because they're not the city-funded one, we shouldn't assume that they're not going to do the 365 shelter.
I just feel like it's really hard to do a gap analysis when you don't know what services are being provided in your community. So it's really hard to vote on this. And I mean, it's not hard for me personally to vote on this, because we need more shelter. Whether or not I feel like they're operational or not, it is more likely we need more shelter. But it's hard to know right now, because we do not know what shelter will be provided once the cold season is up right now.
So regardless of who provides it, I think we as a committee can say yes to the city. We want you to continue some funding, and yes to the county. Would you please join in with the city in that funding as well? I think we as a committee can make that motion really regardless of who's providing the shelter.
Correct.
Yeah, because that would fall into the specific roles of local government. So, okay, didn't mean to open a can there. I just thought it works so well. Have it all the time.
Do we have a motion?
Excuse me.
Oh, go ahead, Terry.
I believe Alder McElhaney can confirm this, but the city council voted to give the police department $400,000 in ARPA funding to use for the homeless, and Chief Barnes indicated that he wanted to use that for shelter 365 days of the year. So I understand that funding is available for shelters.
So then we'd just be asking the county to step up and do that as well, would be our recommendation, because the city already has. Is that your
Correct.
point?
Correct.
That's my point.
Or does the county provide staffing, or, as opposed to monetary support? Because that's sometimes easier, sometimes harder.
And that could be in the long-term plan too.
I see that instead of just asking for money, I really do see where the county has more resources that we can use. Be it NCHC, be it, other county resources. Money is great, but we need the resources as well. And I certainly don't see us as a task force just looking for a monetary contribution. I mean, it's great, but I think we need to connect people to services. That's really our need. We can get a shelter, we can do whatever, but we need to get those connections to services, get housing. And so I do agree that we should look beyond the money contribution, but what resources does the city have in personnel and the county have in personnel, and how that can mesh to do when we do a surge sheltering, get those connections. And that's what day services is supposed to be doing as well. And that is our goal with getting day services going every day, is again, that connection to services, connection to treatment, whatever it is, connection to whatever will make people better, be it whatever they need. And I think, so we have to look beyond the money, and because we have a great amount of resources with personnel.
Right, and I think right now, short-term, we're looking at partnering with the city and allocating some funding for short-term housing. And I think that's, what we just discussed is how do we do that? And we'll need a motion to be able to direct the county to do that.
Right. Can I make a motion at this point?
Sure.
Can
Go ahead.
I make a comment for, I'll give you my perspective as staff, not on the actual motion or what the policy direction would be. This is just the way I frequently engage in conversations with board members. When you're trying to accomplish a goal, the goal, the policy direction is really absolutely the purview of whether it's the elected body or the subordinate body. That's your direction. My only suggestion would be leave the how to accomplish the thing to staff. I frequently say, articulate the goal you want. We are the how people, and I give a very mundane, non-attractive, non-stimulating example. You tell us, hey, we want to you want to approve a capital project. You approve the project, the end goal. It could be something as very much attractive as a street, a roadway. Whether county staff are the ones that do the paving, the curbing, or whether we contract for it that is within the wheelhouse of staff. Put out the RFP, assess what the best, most cost-effective way to accomplish the end goal is. So we're the how, you are the what the goal is, articulate the vision. So whether it's staffed by a city employee or staffed by a county employee, my only suggestion to you would be focus first and foremost on the goal. If your goal is ensuring that shelter, some form of 365 shelter is available, articulate that as the goal. Staff, city and county, based on what I understand your discussion thus far to be, is that idea of partnerships. Staff from the city and county would partner on how to do that. Again, if that's the goal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
So can I make a motion? I would move that to address the short-term shelter needs on a 365-day basis in our community, that the county would match or exceed the commitment that the city has made.
So we have a motion on the table. Is there a second? Bill? Supervisor Conway, second. Any discussion?
The county already spent our ARPA money.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to formulate. It's the lawyer in me. She wants to think it out a little bit before speaking. I'm not going to not vote in favor of that. I think that, a lot more money needs to be spent, even though the charter repeatedly says, don't spend money in multiple places. Don't look again, Lance, it does. I know, it says without more financial resources. So in light of like what Lance just said, it's broad enough. But I also heard there was other non-financial resources that we wanted the county to possibly expend. So I think that is very directive than telling them that we want them to spend money, which, like I said, I'm not going to not vote in favor of, because the resources need to be put on the table. But I thought we were trying to go in the interim, maybe not in final report, which we've established. There's an interim report, there's a final report, to recommend that at least the city and the county work together to both support financially and non-financially 365 shelter services. I thought that was maybe more the direction this committee was going than spend the money and spend the money now. But I did hear Lance say earlier, that if we want to expend some money, we do need to tell them now in the interim. And just as a point of discussion, my preference for spending money on the city or county side, future dollars, would be for somebody to coordinate this effort and not necessarily to put it towards shelter. Because we do know there are lots of activities currently happening in our community to build some of that shelter, but that coordination piece that came out of La Crosse would be key for this community to actually move forward. And if the government discussions are going to occur in the way that my mind foresees them, it's not going to be both, most likely. And I would want, as this committee member, to be put on the record as saying that my preference would be for personnel, and that somebody from the city and somebody from the county, and not necessarily matching money. You've put me in a hard place, Mr. Vincent.
I'm sorry. Can I make a comment that might help a little bit? I really appreciate what he said about, we talk about the end goal, but you have flexibility in how you accomplish that goal. So I think that's kind of important to understand. And then in relation to the longer term approach, we haven't gotten to those yet. This is the short term recommendation. That is still something we can discuss and make recommendations on down the road.
And Mr. Chair, can I
Sure.
just add one thing? I think, and again, this is good discussion you're having. Just to go ahead and go back to the motion that you had a couple of meetings ago, you did, I think, to your point, Beth Ann, the direction you gave is for myself and city staff, and Chief Barnes and I met on Friday for about 4 hours to talk through a number of things already relative to addressing not only the anticipated gap in shelter services, but that long-term recommendation relative to developing a strategic plan to address homelessness. And I understand your point, that long-term, the importance of that coordination piece, not only having the kind of the piece that the city has made that investment in already with Tracy and the outreach that she does, but that project management piece in my mind, if I'm using kind of words from kind of the administration context, how important that is. And that was the big takeaway for me from the La Crosse, the city and county, is it takes both. I wouldn't say, and I can't commit funds, but certainly my vision thus far, based on your direction previously, is to work to develop that strategic plan. And I see someone's going to need to deliver that coordination, that project management piece. And I fully would anticipate, based on your conversations you've had, not only before this meeting, but thus far in this meeting, that the request may be of the county and the city to use the La Crosse model as a basis, or at least examine it. And that would address, I think, your concern. I would be remiss if I didn't say, in speaking with Chief Barnes, that is one of the requests he had, if necessary, was to relay his thoughts, is that importance, that very important need to ensure that 365 shelter. He asked me to convey that, but also that we work together to ensure that long-term plan, part of that strategic plan that you've already discussed. So I think your conversation otherwise has largely mirrored what he asked me to convey.
Okay. I guess even maybe this helps you too, Beth Ann. You know, when we say the city's made a commitment, and one of that commitment is a person funded by the police department to be a part of the solution. You know, so maybe we could even amend that motion to say match or exceed what the city is doing in money and personnel, if you feel more comfortable with that. Because I think part of I'm not directing this one at you, but I think one of the strengths of this community has been how the city has stepped up. And a lot of our discussion has, well, this is not just a Wausau problem. This is more of a regional problem. So I think it's very fair for us to maybe ask, and this is not a criticism of the county in any means, but they were looking for a recommendation from this committee. And I think a recommendation from this committee is our county should do at least what the city is doing or similar to what the city is doing to address the issue, because it's not just a Wausau issue, it's a county issue. And what we haven't got to yet is how to engage the other communities, the Westons, the Schofields, the things like that. That's not at the table here, but at least we have the county alert and participating.
City of Schofield just sold a parcel to Habitat for Humanity to get more affordable housing down there. Little city. But to your point, I mean, the county does things well, the city does things well. The city doesn't have a healthcare center, county does. So we don't necessarily have to spend more, but we could spend what we have differently. I think we do need to spend more, but we could use what we already have, social workers and whatnot, to focus more on unhoused individuals and getting them housed. That would be I think, a pretty decent way to go about it. And also, as Lance likes to say, a dollar is not a dollar is not a dollar when we come to county budgeting. For our purposes, we could allocate a smaller amount and get more from state and federal. So being efficient in how we ask for money is a very key thing.
Sure. So my point of view is that the county already has staffing to address a lot of the, let's say, wraparound services through the healthcare center. So I'm not sure if amendment to the motion or amendment to the motion would be to include personnel in that, because they're already there. So,
but also ways to connect people with them too. Because that's one of the big gaps.
It's the connection, right? How do we, steer people to those resources?
Hey, Ron, if I may.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Am I on? It kind of addresses what both of you said is the community on call. That's an ad hoc response. I mean, nobody really owns that. Tracy kicked that off, and it's very volunteer intensive. So when they do execute that or implement that, a lot of volunteers come out. So there's some challenges there with just naturally extending that. But I think it should go without saying that staff will have to be involved in this or other solutions that we have. And I think we will naturally provide those, but the funding has to potentially come first on that. But we're certainly committed to doing that, whether it's through Tracy or some combination of how the lacrosse has put their model out. But I think that gives us a footprint for moving forward on it. But certainly I don't see us committing funds only and then backing away from it.
Sure. Go ahead, Vicki.
I'm just looking at, again, what the agenda says, and it does say the recommendation relative to the local government support of shelter services, so it's relatively narrow in terms of what was on our agenda. So I don't know that it is appropriate for us to make a broader recommendation at this point. I think the other piece of it is that we need to have a more detailed conversation about that. Going back to what I said before, at least in my mind, in terms of looking at what the role is, we've established so far some alignment, I think, around the role of potentially what we'd like the county and city to be doing regarding the shelter. The other pieces, and we look at the lacrosse model and all of the partners that they brought together and all of the different pieces, we haven't had that conversation here, right? So I really don't, I guess I would be reluctant to single out North Central Healthcare as being the solution here, is which is I'm hearing a little bit, because we are certainly part of it, but we don't do housing case management, as I have mentioned. We are not housing navigators, and that's a function that exists in some entities in the private sector. It's not what we do, and so I think we may need clarity around that. But I think that all goes to my point of we should have additional conversation when we're recommending a longer term goal, which I think, again, advocating for a coordinator position is really important, because I don't believe that any people in the system that I know of at the county or North Central Healthcare, that there's enough to dedicate a full-time position to be able to do this, which is part of why we're in the boat that we're in, because we are doing bits and pieces of things. But to do an organized approach like La Crosse did, I think there has to be dedicated time to be able to do that. To access, yes, some of the services exist and need to be used in a different way. However, there needs to be a coordinated way to do that in order for us to be successful.
Yeah, thank you, Vicki. I think that's a good point. So really, Craig's amendment to the motion about staffing would probably play a role in that, if you want to make that amendment.
No, based on what I've heard and explanation, I think I should withdraw that part of the amendment, and just go with the commitment to match or exceed for 365 shelter, what the city has done.
Okay. Any further discussion? So we have a motion on the table to match or exceed the city funds for 365 shelter. And I think we have a second. Bill, I think you seconded it.
Do we want to say anything about capacity of it? Because currently it's the one that is currently here is 30, which is not enough. I don't know if that you want part of it or just leave it to be.
You could say the word adequate.
Mhm.
Nice subjective adequate.
My face don't lie.
Can I, again, you guys can, of course, provide as much detail as you would like. There's going to need to be a lot of further conversations about this. And I think you've given the high-level direction. If this motion, based on your conversation, if it passes, that conversation is going to come up. And it's ultimately going to be an RFP, I would imagine, to move forward, as you referenced. And there's a lot more work to be done. I'll stop there.
Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion on the table, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you, Terry. Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the next meeting date and time, which has to be determined yet. I believe, right? I don't think I have anything on the calendar. Okay, we do have the 19th on the table. So the next item on the agenda is adjournment. Do I have a motion? Motion by Supervisor Conway. Second? Vicki, thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.